On this video, I would like to continue what I have been doing in the book of Hebrews, reading the Greek, looking at the grammar, phrase by phrase or word by word as much as I can, and then giving not only a translation, but a running kind of a commentary. So we stopped last time on my last video in verse 10 of chapter 2. We're looking at Christ, who has become the pioneer of our salvation through suffering, unlike angels. and he accomplishes that which makes him greater than angels for us. So we pick it up at this point at verse 10. Eprepen gar auto, dihan tapanta, kai dihu tapanta. Palus huius eis doxan agaganta tan archegan te soterias auton, dia pathematon teleosai. For it was fitting for him, on account of whom are all things, and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons into glory, to perfect the pathfinder of their salvation through sufferings. Eprepen is the imperfect indicative active third person singular from prepo, meaning to be fitting. For it was fitting for him, on account of whom are all things. D is from dia, the alpha has elided. It's taking the accusative case here with chan, the relative pronoun, on account of whom, accusative singular, referring back to Christ, chas, hu, ho, chan. So, on account of whom are all things. Kai di hu. Notice dia here is used with the genitive as well, and through whom. So dia with the accusative means on account of, and dia with the genitive means through, showing channel. So he's really the cause of all things and the channel of all things. Speaking of God, in bringing many sons into glory. Palus huius eis doxan agaganta. Agaganta is from ago. It is the aorist participle in bringing sons into glory. Uh, Speaking of God, from ago. So in bringing many sons into glory, uh, he's going to talk about how he was perfected. The aorist participle, like I said, from ago, in bringing many sons, or leading many sons into glory, to perfect the archegon. Uh, it was fitting for him, by bringing many sons into glory, to perfect the archegon. Archegon means, I believe here, pathfinder or leader, to perfect the pathfinder of their salvation, a believer's salvation, through diapathematon, through sufferings. And notice teleosai is from teleao. It's the aorist active infinitive from teleao. So it was fitting, I believe the writer of Hebrews is saying, that God, on account of whom are all things, and through whom are all things, by bringing many sons into glory, which Christ has accomplished for us, to perfect the pathfinder, the archegon, beautiful word here, of their salvation through suffering. Christ has cut the way through the thicket of death, and he has become our wonderful pathfinder. In verse 11, he then continues, Ha tegar hagiadzon kai hoi hagiadzamenoi ex genas pantes, di hen aitian uk ipaskunetai adelphus autus kalein. That is, for indeed, the one who sets apart, who sanctifies, and those who are being sanctified are all out of one, on account of which cause or reason he is not ashamed to call them brethren, saying. Now notice, ha or hagiadzo is a participle, a present participle, nominative, masculine, singular, from hagiadzo. So the one who is sanctifying and those who are being sanctified. Hagiat Samanoi is from hagiadzo. Again, it's a present passive participle, nominative, masculine, plural from hagiadzo. So the one who is sanctifying and those who are being sanctified are all out of one. In other words, we're one with Christ, I think he's saying. We've been identified with him because he became human as the God man, perfect God man. So the one who sanctifies and the ones who are being sanctified are now all out of one, on account of which reason he is not ashamed to call them brothers. Episkunetai is from episkunamai. Here we're looking at he is not ashamed, present indicative middle. He himself is not ashamed. Brothers, them to call. Literally, to call them brothers. Kalein is from kaleo. It is the present active infinitive from kaleo. So the one who sets apart and those who are being set apart, and I take the one being Christ, who is setting apart, I should say, and those who are being set apart, that would speak of believers, of all believers in Christ, are all one, on account of which reason he is not ashamed, he himself is not ashamed to call them brothers. And we move on to the next verse, Legon, apagelo ta anamasu tois adelphois mu, in meso ecclesias humneso sep. For I will declare your name to my brothers. In the midst of the church or the assembly, I will praise you. Apagelo is from apagelo. Here we have the future indicative active, first person singular from apagelo. In other words, I will declare your name. It is interesting here that in the future you have one lambda, I will declare your name, where in the present two, apangelo. So I will declare or proclaim your name to my brethren in the midst of the church, whom they say, I will praise you, from whom neo, where we get the idea of hymns. And here we have a future indicative active first person singular. The quote here is going back to the Hebrew Bible, Psalm 22. This is a lament psalm in which the psalmist is lamenting his plight and then talks about how God would deliver him and he would declare the name of the Lord among his brethren. And I believe that the writer of Hebrews now is applying this to Jesus Christ, saying, I will declare your name to my brethren. Jesus Christ, in his victory over sin and death, appeared to the apostles and declared the great deliverance in the name of his Father. So I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the church I will praise you. Again, showing the oneness between Christ and believers. And again, ego essemai pepoithos ep alto. And again, I will be confident in him. Here we have essemai, your future indicative. First person singular, your future indicative middle, first person singular. I will be persuaded or confident, pepoithos, in him. Pepoithos is a participle, a perfect participle, nominative, masculine singular from patho. So I will be persuaded in him. It is interesting here as we look at this word, like I said, it means to be persuaded or to be convinced. And I believe it's looking again at the victory that Christ has accomplished in his death and glorious resurrection. And then we move on in the last verse, or last phrase of verse 13. Kai palan edu ego kai tapadia hamoi eduken hataas. Behold, I and the children which God has given to me. Notice here, ego is your first person personal pronoun. I and the children which God edoken is from didomi, aorist indicative active, third person singular from didomi. So behold, I and the children which God gave to me. I'm thinking here, as I look at this text, that he's quoting from Isaiah chapter 8, verse 17 in the Septuagint. And it's interesting, Isaiah talked about he and his children being signs. And I think here the writer of Hebrews is applying that text to Christ. Behold, I will be persuaded in him, and speaking of Christ, in his victory and his confidence in his Father, who was with him and delivered him through the cross and in the resurrection. And then again, I and the children which God has given me, that Jesus and believers are one, just like Isaiah and his children are one or were one. And I think he's appealing to that text, applying it here to Jesus Christ. So if I could just summarize what I think we have read, it was fitting for him, that is for God, on account of whom are all things and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons into glory, to perfect the pathfinder of their salvation through sufferings. To not that Christ needed perfection, but he was perfected as the perfect pathfinder. He was sinless, but he had to go to the cross to conquer death and to become that perfect pathfinder. And so He is the one who is setting apart, and those who are being set apart, us as believers, we're all out of one. On account of which reason, he's not ashamed to call us brethren. And he then quotes from Psalm 22, a lament psalm, and applies what the psalmist was saying, I'll declare your name among my brethren, that we're brothers now with Jesus Christ in this victory over sin and death. And then he quotes Isaiah 8 to drive it further home. I will be confident in him, speaking of Isaiah, now applying it to Christ. And behold, I am the children which God has given to me. And Isaiah was speaking of the deliverance of his day, but it's now being applied to the greater deliverance that we as believers and Jesus Christ as our archegon, uh, the two are brought together. So Christ, uh, again, was confident in his Father's deliverance and bringing him back to glory. And I and the children, referring to Christ and believers now, are all of one, just like Isaiah and his children were one. And I think the writer of Hebrews is making that application. I hope this helps somebody. I'm enjoying it because it helps me keep my Greek and Hebrew alive. If anyone's interested, I'm doing videotapes on Aramaic, Hebrew, and Akkadian, along with Greek. So anyone that might be interested, they could follow that as well. Since I'm not in a classroom anymore, this, I guess, is my classroom at my age now. So thank you, and God bless.